Well, in terms of films whose ratings have been quite, well, not really confusing, but quite opening, not necessarily in a bad way. I mean, there's all the controversy surrounding Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 and how it really pushed the boundaries of 12A, and not just because it's the first MCU flick to have an F bomb in, but just in terms of on screen violence. Now, I don't think it too violent for 12A. I do think it's perfectly wrapped up within that the confines of that rating. Nevertheless, it does show what the 12A can do, and even America's PG-13. It's not the most violent of MCU films, granted. That would be last year's Doctor Strange 2, and that really did just show that the BBFC aren't necessarily the pearl-clutching prudes they make themselves out to be. Next one, Asteroid City was another. Again, not exactly for any bad reason, but of course it had to be get its PG-13 in America on appeal due to Scarlett Johansson's blink and you'll miss it news scene. BBFC were quite cool about that and just 12A without any issues whatsoever. Don't suppose there's a huge amount else I can really give much to. And obviously, M. Freegan's 15 rating was fucking ridiculous because, yeah, it's like I say, only would be a 12A rated film, but it's like 12, very much in the center of 12A with little to no violence or gore in whatsoever. Then again, I haven't seen the uncut, unrated version, which is i.e. the R-rated version. You could talk about Oppenheimer and, yeah, we'll just Oppenheimer while we're at it. Yeah, because while that is I suppose R rating, 15 plus rating, 15. I mean, it's a very mild 15, and only 7 F bombs in this 3-hour runtime. Very little gore. I think it's only the sex scenes and nudity scenes that really just would be the things that would keep it out of 12A. The only other thing that really comes across my mind is just that Paw Patrol movie, which I haven't seen, but it got a U rating here, and even though finding it's rated PG in both America and Australia, and it was given a K7 rating in Finland, and while it got a 0 rating in Germany, that was only after cuts were given. Oh, yeah, there was also that issue with Mafia Mama requiring a few seconds cuts to get a 15. I saw it on streaming, so I'm guessing their cuts were just waived. And I'm guessing it's some sort of there's a scene where the stiletto to the eye. Nothing I saw I thought should be outside of a 15 rating, but then again, I am kind of like that. So yeah, I mean that's kind of what it is. I suppose by that point I could also talk about Thanksgiving and Scream 6 both being rated 18s. Thanksgiving I suppose kind of deserved it. It was pretty fucking brutal. Scream 6 I can't say for sure. Well, maybe. Well, jury's out now. I don't think Scream 6 should have been an 18. Scream 4 can be a 15. The next two Screams can be. But no, Thanksgiving I would say if any film is going to earn its 18, what is what I've seen this year. It would be that. Obviously, I haven't seen Infinity Pool, but I'm going to just go on a whim and suggest that would definitely earn its 18 because that's an NC-17 from America, and yeah, that's pretty fucking based. So here you go.
As far as I'm concerned, many films I liked also quite controversial, or ones I usually talk about, but some of them were terrible, some of them were okay, and some of them were very good. Now let's start with the ones that weren't very good, like Infinity Pool. Oh boy, where do I begin? Now, I've talked about this previously on a podcast about Canadian film censorship. I talked with Ben Reed, good man. I actually met him when I was at the Rio Cinema in Dalston in London, and we saw Antichrist. I thought, hey, good person to talk about movies and Canada. And needless to say, Infinity Pool for US and Canadian audiences, when it came in cinemas, they released it with the rated R version, which in itself was still very strong and still very violent and sexual. But they did tone down certain sequences and frames that were deemed a bit too much. The sequences in question that you probably didn't see if you were in the US and Canada, but you did see in the UK when it came out in cinemas and for DVD and Blu-ray, was full-blown masturbation, hand being stroked on someone's cock. You also got to see more explicit frames of graphic, extreme, gory violence involving a man's face being punched and smashed to bits, and there's blood everywhere, gory detail as well as quite prolonged and very bloody stabbings. And then in the sex scene, there are more depictions of genitalia than we see in the rated R cut, but nonetheless, the effect was still awfully strong, and even with some of those cuts and trims, it still created quite a high impact, despite the fact that, regardless of all those things, the movie just was not very good. Very confusing. The censorship issues also had a large part to play in why I didn't like it. And just what on earth was all that about? I didn't like Possessor for the same reasons. For the reasons I also did not like Infinity Pool, so we'll just pretend this movie never existed. Shame on the MPAA and Neon for cowering down to public pressure from moms of liberty types who don't want you to see the uncut version. And when they did release it uncut, it was already too little too late, and it caused a lot of distribution issues and whatnot. So they ultimately did release it, but you have to get it for like a 4K Ultra HD version, which is going to be quite expensive. But if you get it in Canada, it's for home media, they released it. Fuck the MPA. And also, fuck right-wing fans who watched Sound of Freedom. When you have people who are like Jordan Peterson, Elon Musk, and Donald Trump supporting a film like this, you have to take it with a bit of a grain of salt. Because the film itself is not necessarily bad, it's very well-meaning, but there's so much baggage behind this. Also, some of the stuff that's happened in Tim Ballard's personal life that has caused him some legal troubles in recent months. It just puts a sour dent on the film as well. And I also heard that the director was not getting paid when they ultimately did release this, and Angel Studios bought the rights from Fox after it was made like about 5 years ago. So there's a whole lot of issues surrounding Sound of Freedom that in itself aren't necessarily what's inside the film, even though it does have some material that should be in the rated R movie. I don't want to see references to pedophilia and child molestation in films that are PG-13. Leaves a bad taste in my mouth, so it has more appropriate 15 certificate in the UK. And the message is obvious. It shows us wrong for what it is, but for some reason it just gave me brass-eye flashbacks, and it was not pleasant to watch. Serbian film has that sort of era about it at places, and just, no thank you. And just the right-wing sort of promotion behind it, and with Christian evangelical groups, made me like this film a hell of a lot less. So, the marketing is largely to blame for a lot of it. And then getting on to the more interesting type of films that we've seen, like Megan and Cocaine Bear and Strays, three films that I have on my top 10. Now, Megan, for people who are watching, avoided the same problems that Infinity Pool had and released an uncut version and a censored version. Cinemas and theaters. It was released PG-13, which got a 15 nonetheless because it's a horror film. Not as graphic as most 15 films are nowadays, but there are some scenes that were quite, especially the scene where you see a child's ears being ripped off. Even in the uncut version, which is still a 15, it was not a pleasant scene. It was just quite cringeworthy. And then person gets acid burnt on their face, and there's implication of blood pouring down in the censored version, but in the uncut version, we actually see our skin sort of peeling off a bit. So there you go. I know some of the marketing before the film was going to get released in early January did make it seem like it's probably going to be R-rated, and there was some controversy about that, but ultimately um, paid adieu to the fans who really wanted to see it, but obviously they're trying to get that teen market, so they had to cut and trim out the language and some of the violence and gore, which, in my opinion, I don't think it really hurt the film. Because I've seen the censored version initially, and I've seen both versions. I think the censored version is just fine. I had a good laugh. It was very entertaining. Reminded me of Small Soldiers. But as far as I'm concerned, the 15 version, it stands. Even though that scene with the child's ears being ripped off still makes me cringe. But oh, that was painful. Aside that, there's not much I can tell you past that. Strays, there was censorship for that, but it was rated R. It was a 15 movie involving talking dogs. That's not something you see very often. It wasn't certainly marketed for children, but unless you want to see a kids movie that's essentially about a young puppy that wants to castrate his owner for neglecting him, and watching dogs humping and shitting, and getting erections, and taking magic mushrooms, and listen to Mr. Oizo's Flat Beat, which is one of my favourite songs, by the way. It features that yellow puppet. Be my guest, but like Sausage Party, you might have a bit of explaining to do for your children. And that's why I love it so much. It's number 2 on my list, in case anyone asks. For my podcast, I did have the opportunity to see Cocaine Bear, so I'm in a new location, in case if the audio was a little bit shy, but I did see that as part of a focus group for the BBFC. And I also saw it in France, single in English stuff, because if I'd seen it in its original version, the joke would have been a little bit lost on me. As far as I'm concerned, ratings-wise, 15 is probably not the best. I mean, first of all, you got a title that references a Class A substance, or Schedule 1, which is probably one of the reasons why in some markets it was called Crazy Bear, like it was in France and parts of the Middle East, to avoid some of that shock value a little bit. But outside of that, outside of seeing children accidentally swallowing coke and then spitting it out, we see pretty graphic and extreme scenes of violence, albeit comedic, but it is still quite nasty and quite explosive. We see dismemberment, disembowelment, someone's head being blown off, and as part of his skull is exposed. I mean, ugh. Not exactly what I would presume at the 15 level. Not by a stretch. Equalizer 3 also was another film that was rated by BBFC that actually was not censored like the other 2 films that were, which is a bit coincidental considering how violent that movie was. And we actually see scenes of people getting a gun in the eye socket, and there's dismemberment and torture. Someone's, I think, hand is cut off, and then there's decapitation. I mean, the sort of violence one would ever find in an 18 film, it's in here. So they must have slept at the wheel on this one, or maybe there just wasn't the area consistent. Maybe they got so many complaints about, why are you cutting this? Why are you cutting this for the UK and Irish market? Well, Australia does that. They cut Renfield and Next Goal Wins just to get the lower ratings. But what are you going to do? So yeah, there was that problem, but I think as far as the rating is concerned, it probably would have benefited with the 18 uncut for all 3 films, mind you, particularly the first and the third, which I think are the most violent. Passages got in a bit of trouble because that was when I saw it at the Everyman in Cardiff. Bobatron couldn't make it, so I done it in his favour, or my own, because I was more interested in seeing it because I heard it was NC-17. And he told me about that it was NC-17 before anyone else did, so I had to see it for myself. And as far as ratings are concerned, I've seen 18 films much stronger than Passages. It's not as strong as La Vida de Chapitre 1 et 2 or Blue is the Warmest Colour, which both have Adèle Exarchopoulos and also deal with LGBT relationships and sort of bisexual dating, that sort of thing. The most you'll ever see, at least in Passages, which was threatened with the NC-17, but they released it unrated by Mubi, which was its distributor for the UK and US, is arse cheeks, sort of gyrating around. You don't even see full frontal nudity, just arse cheeks, sort of gyrating around doing what was like a 2 or 3 minute long sex scene. It goes on for a while, but I think probably it's because the homosexual content is probably what got under the American skin a bit, especially considering all the policies that have been put into place, like in Florida and Arkansas and Texas, that warn people don't say gay and that sort of thing. So very politicized, as far as I can tell you. There are some other films that I know got a bit of flack. I know Family Switch. I knew which I haven't seen. That was Netflix. That was PG, but it had a joke of incest, as far as I can tell you, which certainly caught some people by surprise. Well, I know people were talking about Barbie, which I liked. Matt didn't really like that much, but I did. I know some people were taken aback by some of the rude and adult humor, like saying, "I'm going to see my gynecologist," and Ken doesn't have a penis, and I don't have a vagina. And they was probably like, "How do I explain this to my 6-year-old daughter who's obsessed with Barbie dolls?" Well, as it turns out, the marketing made it seem like it was what exactly was it was. I thought it was going to be a PG, but when I saw PG-13 for suggested references and brief language, I thought, okay, the marketing on here is real confused. I mean, it made so much money, and many people saw it, young and old, so it didn't make much of a blip. But I'm sure some confusion came into people's minds as to who exactly is this marketed to. Probably a lot more so than even the Simpsons movie, which probably had some of those issues because both of those films were PG-13. But Simpsons was PG in the UK because Simpsons is somehow viewed as a more sort of entry gateway adult cartoon, even though it sort of fits the bill of almost being a family show and an adult cartoon. It's a weird one. It's not something that Rick and Morty and Family Guy and South Park certainly cannot say, or Demon Slayer.
It's just that it's just surprisingly tame for a Scorsese film. Because the same guy made Casino and Goodfellas and Wolf of Wall Street. You'd expect so many F-bombs, and yet it's only mentioned twice in the 3.5-hour runtime. That's just weird. I just think Barbie's sexual references are a bit strong for PG, so yeah, I agree with 20. That's it, really.
All right, then. Anything about Cocaine Bear or Strays?
Nah, that is fine. That is exactly where it needs to be.
And I know this one isn't ratings related, but Sound of Freedom is somehow tied to all this because supposedly AMC was accused of, AC breakouts. They thought they're trying to censor this film. It's QAnon conspiracy.
Yeah, well, that's just stupidity. I've not seen Sound of Freedom. I had no desire to want to see it, and that's QAnon propaganda, and Jim Caviezel's a dick. Is that his name? I don't give a fuck. And that's all I've got to say on that.
So yeah, that's about as far as I can tell you. I mean, I could go on about how to blow up a pipeline for hours and hours and hours and hours on end, but I'm not going to, so I'm going to be bouncing. But hope everyone has a happy Christmas and New Year. And in case if there's a violent invasion that's being attacked by nuclear bomb or cyber warfare by the Russians or the Israelis, now you know what to do. Arm yourself for the next violent invasion, or go see that Alex Garland movie called Civil War that's coming out next year, which certainly is keeping my interest alongside other films like American Fiction and The Peasants. They Shot the Piano Player, and so on and so forth. So yeah, all ears on alert.